Fit for life. I eat carrots, I eat cabbage, I eat sprouts, I eat radish, don't eat sugar, don't eat fat. What about salt? Don't eat that. Look after myself. I'm mad about health, mad about health, mad about myself. I go for a jog, I go for a swim, I go for a run, I go to the gym, I got the gear, I got the kit, got the strip, it's a perfect fit. Look after myself. I'm mad about health, mad about health, mad about myself. Feel my pulse rate, feel my biceps, feel my kneecap, feel my triceps. I'm really fit. But you know what? My right knee hurts a lot. Right knee swollen, ankle sprained, wrist is twisted, the shoulder's strained. But I'm really fit. I'm much stronger. Never mind the pain. I'm going to live longer. Something funny that I've been told. Why work so hard just to get old? Don't get that. Don't get it at all. Can't stop now. Got to do some more. Look after myself. Mad about health. Mad about health. Mad about myself. No time left to hang about. No time left for going out. No time left to see the wife. I don't care. I'm fit for life. That's what I am. Fit for life. Pity about the knee. I'm fit for life. Pity about the ankles. I'm fit for life. Pity about the wife. I'm fit for life. Fossils and my brother. My brother works at the Natural History Museum in London. He's a fossil. No, sorry, I got that wrong. He looks after the fossils. Looks after the fossils? What sort of job is that? I mean, it can't be very hard, can it? I mean, they're just like stones. They don't jump at you like if you're looking after a tiger. Yeah, imagine that. You come down in the morning, there's a tiger, you go up to it and you say, what do you want to eat? And the tiger goes, you! Ah! Well, that would be hard, wouldn't it? Now, my brother looks after fossils. I went to his room 40 years ago and there were 4 fossils sitting on a shelf. And I said, what are you doing, Brian? And he said, looking after the fossils. Well, they're not going to jump off the wall, are they? I said. He said, oh, well, you never know. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. Yeah? Well, I went to his office the other day. The 4 fossils were still there on the shelf. I said, Brian, the fossils are still there. And he said, yeah, that's right. That's because I was here. So now listen, if ever you find a fossil and you don't know what it's called, you can pick it up, say, and you shout at it, Dave, Melanie, and it doesn't answer. You know what you can do? You can take it to the Natural History Museum in London and you go up to one of the people in uniform and tell them you've got a fossil and you don't know its name. Dave, Melanie, you see, it doesn't answer. And you know what they do? They send for my brother, Dr. Brian Rosen. And he lives in a cave underneath the museum. He wears a kind of leopard skin bikini and he's got a great big club. Hoo, yeah? And he comes up from down below the museum and you'll hear him coming. Hoo, hoof, hoof. And suddenly, boing! The big double doors open. And there in front of you, there he is in his leopard skin bikini. And you can go up to him and say, hello, yeah, I've found a fossil and I don't know its name. See, Dave, Melanie, look, see, it doesn't answer. And my brother takes a magnifying glass out of his leopard skin bikini bottom, and it's one of those little ones, you know, and he puts it in his eye, and it makes his eye go all really big. And then he says, he studies it really hard, and he says, no, that's not Dave. No, that's not Melanie. That is an ammonite. Or maybe you'll say, that is a belemnite. And you'll be very pleased. And you know, if it's a really, really good one, do you know what he does then? He nicks it off you. Yeah, he does. Because if it's really, really good, it doesn't belong to you. No, it doesn't belong to him. Do you know who it belongs to? The Queen. And do you know, if you go to Buckingham Palace, you'll see that it's stuffed full of old fossils. Clever cakes and other stories. The Devil Dog. I'm not afraid of the dark, said Desmond to himself. I'm not afraid of the dark. Anyway, I ought to be used to it by now. He was Farmer Fiddler's boy on the farm up the valley, and quite often he was kept working late. This night it was lambing, standing with the sheep, trying to make sure that every lamb that was in a mother ewe came out alive. He'd gone on working till he was stiff with cold and nearly asleep on his feet. One moment he thought he saw a lamb with a dog's head, And the next he was sure he felt something strange in his hand, opened his fingers, and there looking at him was what he thought was a big sheep's eye. Now, it was time for the walk home in the dark. No harm could come to him on the road, surely. There was the old beech tree. That meant he was halfway home. What if it had been a sheep's eye, he thought. What would have I done then? He shivered. What a cold night. What's that noise? There was a hard, brisk rustling in a tree. It was above his head. He looked up. No, it was nothing. Just the line of the branches, cutting up the sky. He walked on. The cold was biting his face. He was coming to the bit of the road he called the tunnel. Prickly hawthorn trees had grown over the road, and any light from the moon or the stars was kept out by the branches. It was just like a tunnel. Desmond listened to the sound of his feet slow down as he stepped into it. Well into the middle, he felt something on his neck. He rushed his hand up to it. What's that? As he spoke, there was a rustle in the ditch beside him, and he stopped dead still in the middle of the road. Oh, the thing on his neck was just a wet leaf, so that was that. But what was that rustle? He looked into the deep dark of the ditch. There was more rustling, and then a whimper. It sounded like a dog in pain. Desmond couldn't see, but he called out to it. Here, boy. Here, boy. And the thing whimpered again. So he took a step nearer. He saw a flash of teeth, and it rustled again. Was it a dog? Or something bigger? It seemed to be caught, helpless. So he stepped up to it. Yes, it was a dog. Thank goodness for that. And it looked like it had broken its leg, poor thing, and had got weak and cold, trying to get home. Mind you, whose dog was it? Desmond reckoned to know every dog round these parts, and this poor little red and white fellow wasn't one he recognised. Now, lie there a bit more, boy, he said to it, and I'll fetch you some dock leaves from by the stream. He had it in mind to tie the leaves round the bad leg and see if he could walk the dog home with him. There might be a few pence reward in it for him from the person who had lost it. The stream was just a few steps away, and Desmond was soon down to the water and back with the sopping leaves. When he got back, the sight that hit him shook him through and through. The dog had grown huge in the ditch. It was now as big as a bull, and its great red and white side heaved up and down. The whimpering was now more like a roar. The wet leaves froze in his hands, and his eyes seemed to freeze with them. Then he knew he was trapped. He had been tricked by a devil dog. Oh yes, he had heard about devil dogs from Farmer Fiddler. Devil dogs, Farmer Fiddler had said, they beg you to help them with their lame leg or their raggedy ear. You turn round and they've changed into a poison fish or blood eagles, and you're a goner, finished, dead as old nails. Desmond clenched his teeth together. I ain't gonna be beaten by no devil dog, he said to himself, and he stepped towards the giant beast. Farmer Fiddler had always said that if you ever meet a devil dog, never say a word. Desmond would do just as Farmer Fiddler said, but he reckoned he could do something else. He had beat this old devil dog with kindness, with his hand shaking and his teeth held tight together. He tied the freezing leaves round the devil dog's leg, and not once did he say a thing. When the leg was all tied up, out of the ditch climbed the creature. It towered over Desmond, and he could feel its warm breath on his face. It gave a husky right at him. If I'm finished, now's the time, Desmond thought. At least no one can say I didn't try and help a poor dumb thing in pain. Then what do you know? The beast turned round and trotted off down the road away from Desmond. Well, what do you know, he said to himself. What do you know? And didn't I see it wag its tail just then? But no one will believe me when I tell that story later. But no matter. It's time I got home, and he took a good, strong step towards home. He hurried through the rest of the tunnel and was soon heading down the part of the road he called the Snake. It curved first one way and then the other. Not long to go now, he thought, and he hurried on round the next bend. But as he turned the corner, he came to a sudden standstill and jammed his leg stiff. In the middle of the road stood a huge, dark-coated goat with bright green eyes and terrible hoofs and horns. Desmond stared at it. Something in the back of his mind talked to him. Hadn't he heard once of a boy who was stopped on the road by a giant sheep, and had turned and run screaming, and hadn't this giant sheep galloped right over him, crushing him with its giant hoofs? And didn't the people who told him the story say that the boy's terrible mistake was to turn and run? If he had stood and faced up to the creature, he'd have been all right. So Desmond did just that. He stood and faced up to the horrible goat. But a moment later, it seemed like this was a frightful mistake, for the great goat took one look at Desmond and started to charge towards him, with its head down, stamping the ground and roaring, looming nearer and nearer, its great gleaming horns. Now is the end, said Desmond. Now is the end, but don't turn, Desmond boy. Don't turn round. And just then, from out of the hedge by the side of the road, leapt a huge red and white dog with a few old leaves tied round its leg. It was the devil dog. It took a great pounce towards the goat and landed on its back. Now the two beasts fought. Sparks flew up from the goat's hoofs on the road, and the dog's teeth flashed. The only light on the whole scene came from the two animals' eyes. They roared "Rawr!" and howled "Rawr!", the goat lunging at the dog with its horns, and the dog trying to sink its teeth into the goat's neck. Jim! Ah! Desmond knew what to do and what not to do. He took neither one step forwards nor one step backwards, but watched the whole fight with his legs still locked stiff. He could hear every breath and every grunt. It was terrifying, but even when it seemed as if the fight would roll right over him, he didn't move. In the end, the goat was getting the worst of it, and it stepped away from the dog. But before Desmond could flicker an eyelid, there was no goat there. In its place flew an owl. It swooped over the dog, flapped silently past Desmond, and away over the hedges and fields. The devil dog stood panting, its great long tongue lolling out of its mouth like a huge lump of liver. It looked at Desmond, and a frightening growl came out of its throat. Well, it's been a long time coming, thought Desmond, and now this is it. But deep inside that head of his, Farmer Fiddler's voice told him, say nothing. Not a word, not a thank you, not a sorry, not a good evening, not a goodbye. Nothing. He knew that if he did, that huge cave of a mouth would open wide and snap him up as if he were nothing more than a little bird. But the great devil dog stood in his way, and Desmond had to get home. He couldn't stay here all night. If these beasts didn't get him first, he'd freeze to death. So, without so much as an excuse me or a please, Desmond walked first towards and then past the devil dog. It stayed just where it was until Desmond had left it behind him. How he would have loved to have looked behind him, though. How he would have loved to glance over his shoulder to make sure he was safe, or to have one last glimpse of the great beast. But he knew not to. No one looks back at a devil dog and lives to see a new day. On he walked, on, and believe it or not, he didn't see another creature along the rest of the road that night. He never turned back all the way home. And he never spoke of the things that happened that night to anyone at all. Not even me. Well, with me today is Francesca Simon, author of, as you may know, the great Horrid Henry books. Look at that great big stack I've got there, Francesca, all owned by my son, who was very cross that I came away with them. He wanted to be absolutely sure I was coming back with them.
Did he count them out?
He didn't. He did trust me, which is quite rare. And we'll also talk about a much newer book, The Monstrous Child. What a terrible title. So quite scary. But let's start with Horrid Henry.
Yes.
Right, great favourite with millions of children. How did you come up with that character, Horrid Henry?
Well, I was thinking a lot about families where there was a good child and a bad child, because I had one child, but a lot of my friends were having two. And I was just interested in the way that that parents decided who was the good child, who was the bad child, and that everybody in the family knew this. So I was interested in that. Also, I'm a big comic book lover, like every single children's author I've ever met in my life. And I like that kind of zap-pow dialogue. But I was just, it was a one-off story about a family where there's a horrid child and a perfect child. And I just wanted to play around with that because I think families are very funny, because almost like the best comedy shows, nobody chooses who is in that family. The kids don't choose the parents don't choose the kids, and somehow there you all are. So I wrote a little one-off story, which got turned down by my publisher because it wasn't what was requested. But I had a brilliant editor, and she said, I really like the story. Maybe we can add a few more, and then we can make it for slightly older kids. And I was really frightened about writing more than one story, and now I've written 100.
100?
100. There are 25 books and 100 Horrid Henry stories, and I was frightened about writing more than one.
And this thing about good child, bad child, that's quite sort of dangerous territory to even go there, because I mean, I'm a parent, you've got one kid, I've got more than one kid. I wouldn't dare even think that I've got a bad child, good child.
I mean, these terms are relatives. I mean, I have a niece and nephew, and when my niece started getting A's at school, her brother instantly started failing at school. So it's more like this sort of balance. I mean, these terms are relatives, but parents know, I mean, if you prefer, the naughty child and the well-behaved child.
Yes.
You know, I was interested in playing off those contrasts, but I was also interested in the fact, which I realized afterwards, but that Horrid Henry and Perfect Peter are two sides of everybody, that these are almost archetypes, so that
inside us, we've got a good bit and a bad bit.
Well, the bit that wants to behave, the bit that wants to do well, and then the other bit that wants to run around screaming and pull people's hair and kick things down. So there's this sort of tension in everyone. So in fact, they are two sides of everybody.
So when you're making up a story, I'm thinking of some of the children writing now, you're making up a story. If you think you've got opposites inside you, let's say there's a sporty side or a not sporty side, or a showy-offy side and a shy side, instead of trying to put them into one character, you can split them off, and so you have sporty person and not sporty person, and then you've got two characters.
But that's what happened with all the Horrid Henry characters, because everybody behaves only according to their adjective. So it's moody Margaret, who's always moody, sour Susan, who's always sour. And it was quite funny to do all these characters who only behave in that one specific way. Weepy William, the child who always forgets everything. So it's, again, but that's a side of all of us.
Yes.
You know, everyone remembers it's no uniform day at school except for one child. That's Weepy William and my son, of course.
Yes. So that's quite a nice tip for people trying to write, I'm thinking, is that you pull out of yourself a what we call a characteristic, a sort of thing about yourself,
Yeah.
and then make that into a whole character.
And that's also quite funny as well.
Yes.
Because nobody behaves like that.
Yeah.
And, those roles can switch around. But it's also, it was also about parents too. Because
Yes.
the kids as young as 4 would always tell me that it was the parents who had created Horrid Henry and Perfect Peter.
Well, I mean, whenever I've read the books, I've always read them to my kids, I've thought, well, actually, the parents, they're not actually that good,
They're
are
not.
they?
They're
not
well-meaning, but they've created
Yeah.
why can't you, the old joke about, why can't you work as hard as your brother? Why can't you be as good as your sister? And that is like guaranteed, if someone said that to you, to make you want to be the exact opposite.
Yes, and my favourite line in all your books is, don't be horrid, Henry. And you think, well, what else is he going to be if he isn't going to be horrid?
Well, because the first story, though, is a bit funny because I only thought of it as one story because it's an odd one to begin with, because it's Henry's horrid, okay, he's going to try to be perfect. But the joke of that is, of course, the parents make endless excuses for Peter behaving badly, and Henry's behavior they just don't see.
Yes. So this idea then maybe the parents are to blame, if you like, if we're going to do any blaming, the parents are to blame for this horrific stuff going on.
They are, absolutely. I mean, they have a kid who doesn't fit in with what they want.
Yeah.
So it's about that as well on another level. But mainly it's meant to be very funny, and I think they are, because Henry is so impulsive. And that was the other thing I wanted to explore about. We're always told, don't do this, don't do that, don't enter. And so it's a sort of safe way of kind of expiating all those desires. And the door says, do not enter. And Henry goes, ooh, I wonder what's there, and goes in.
Yes.
So it's that kind of freedom to express yourself. So it's like, it's all the reasons why everyone loves, going to films, reading books, seeing theater, is you get the chance to explore safely what it's like to do this, what it's like
to do the things you mustn't do.
Exactly, exactly.
The other thing about Henry, which I love, is that he's always plotting, isn't he? He's always scheming. He's always trying to think of some plan.
Well, though I'm quite careful with that, because it's very rare. He doesn't sit on his bed and think, today I'm going to ruin the wedding. It's always that he wants something, and that's how I construct all the stories. So I always think, what does Henry want? Henry wants to get home in time to watch his favorite program. What's stopping him? That. Well, because he has to go to this wedding. Well, maybe he can speed things up. So it's more in aid of getting something else.
Right.
That stuff happens. And that he's greedy, too. So he will plot to get things, but only in the moment. It's very rare that he plans things beforehand. He's impulsive, which is what makes him funny. Because we discovered early on that if he plotted too much early on, that stopped being funny.
And also, you get too much of what's going to happen, so you want to hide
Exactly.
that. So you're starting, so just in terms of like developing a character, you start from something that he wants. He's got to have it.
Totally key.
And he must have it. And there's things going on in life that are stopping him.
He has to go with his brother to the dentist. He doesn't want to. He wants to stay home and read his comic book. Yeah. So stuff will come from that. What does he want? What's stopping him getting what he wants?
Yes.
And what's the outcome? And often I don't know. I just kind of I put them in the situation and kind of listen to them. So if you have sort of strong characters, it's almost like you put them in a white box with a situation, and then you kind of let them go. Or, both Henry and Peter want the same toy.
Yes.
So what happens? And I will explore what happens, usually the toy being destroyed or one of them changes his mind, but all that sibling stuff, because I'm the eldest of 4.
Oh, right.
And I was always, what's the word? If you have 4 kids, you kind of depend on the older one behaving, because there's just too many kids. So
you had to be the goodie?
I had to be so I was the goodie at school, really good. I don't think there's ever been such a good child in the world as me at school, and I was terrible at home. So I was, a Horrid Henry at home and Perfect Peter at school.
Wonderful. Francesca Simon, thanks ever so much indeed.
Thank you.
It's lovely that you came
Michael.
and talked to us. Now, it would be great if you subscribed. That is, you become a subscriber. Look out for the subscribe button. What happens, you see, is that I make new vids every few months, and then I post them up 1 a week. So if you subscribe,
You get to see the new ones just as they come hot off the press. Eeeew.